O'Grady. Welcome to the Thought Room, my angel, my magical fairy of healing. I'm so happy that you accepted my invitation to come sit with me today. I know that it's your first podcast. And I was telling you before we hit record, I love being people's first podcast interview. I was sharing that I got to be my brother Caleb's first podcast interview back in December. And it is just such a joy of mine to see people who have not yet had the opportunity to get on a platform like this step out in that way. It's such a huge, we were actually talking about glandular systems and chakra systems. It's such a big throat chakra opening because it's like, here you are, like sharing your story in this big way.
Truly. And wow. Thank you for your role that you play in this world. You have such a beautiful way of bringing people out of their shell. And from the retreat that I attended with you and watching you do it with woman after woman in pretty much every space that we've shared together, I am floored by your ability to bring comfort to people and by your ability to be this masculine force and just be like, no, give me more, give me more, give me more. It's so potent, and I feel so secure in this space right now.
That is such a huge compliment. That is exactly how I desire for people to feel when they're up here and they're sharing their life's work and they're sharing sometimes really vulnerable stories. So it is every conversation that I have on this podcast, I really do believe is like a ceremony. And it needs the container. It needs this sacred heart connection because at least in my experience, I can really feel when I'm in a conversation where someone's not quite with me. And you feel like you're almost having to work to let them know how important this is to you. And then it's like this crunchy bit because you can't just let the emotions flow. You're actually working to be worthy of their attention and their presence. Experienced so much of that in my life that this has been something I've been striving to remediate with what I offer to the world. So thank you for seeing me.
Wow. Thank you. I've had so many conversations involving this recently. In people that you feel like you have to invite down to go swim with you. And you have to invite down to come to this depth.
Right.
And I feel like more and more I've become aligned with people who are already swimming down there. And I've always felt that with you. And it's a really sweet place to have and to share with somebody.
Wow. Ooh, I love starting the podcast with like just several minutes of mushiness right off the bat, just gooey heart medicine. And so just now that I'm ready to introduce who you are, you're a neuromuscular therapist and you're an Ayurvedic practitioner amongst like roughly a quadrillion other things, which it's always really exciting to invite someone here and be like, I have no idea what we're going to talk about. This is insane. Like it's not a book you're talking about. It's not some offering, some coaching thing. It's like we have so much in common in life and so much overlapping interest and different skill sets. And that's why with you right off the bat, I also felt that deep respect for your craft. You know, I can always tell when someone's super committed to learning, like they just love whatever it is that they're doing. And one tiny little story about you, because there's many, are that you mentioned coming to the retreat that Danny and I put on in Sedona. And I think you were one of the last.
I was the last person.
You took the last spot.
I did.
Which I was so grateful that you did. And it was such a pleasant surprise because I believe we had only connected once before at an event that we were both practitioners at. And then maybe you kept in touch online and yeah, you saw this retreat You came on the retreat, and I'm sure we'll get way more into that later. But after our evening of like deep communion and ceremony with all the women that were in the container, we had roses everywhere in this beautiful, gorgeous home in Sedona, just overlooking these beautiful red rock canyons and infinity pool. We were just wrapped in nature, and so we had vases of roses everywhere. And I remember you came up to me the next morning, and you were just like, "Could I save these roses? Like, could I have a couple of these roses?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, you can have all of these roses. Like, why?" And you were like, "Well, I make these tinctures. I want to extract from these roses that were here, that were absorbing the gorgeous energy that we all co-created this weekend." And I was like, "Wow, that is so cool." I was picturing you like a modern day, like mage or wizard, just like in your basement with like tubes of things boiling, and like
I wish
your
I
little
was that cool.
apothecary, like extracting from our roses. But it's a very satisfying vision. And then the next time you came over to give me some body work, you were like, "I have a gift for you." And you handed me a vial with the essence of the roses from our ceremony at my first ever retreat, which was one of the most powerful, life-changing experiences of my life. And I looked at this gift and I was like, this is such a deep gift. It is so multi-layered. You crafted it out of something that you harvested and collected from a potent and sacred time and event. It was just like, people give gifts all the time to one another, and they're so flippant sometimes. And it's like an expectation, or, someone's birthday, like, let me see what I have to regift them in the closet or whatever. This was such a deeply touching gift. And it brought me so much joy to bring it out this morning. And
it was such a pleasant surprise.
Offer you a couple drops of our roses under our tongue. And I'd actually love to ask you about that, because you explained it to me in brief, but talk about, like, where did this desire to collect the essences of herbs, plants, flowers come from? When did you start working with plant essences? And if someone's never heard about why one might want to do that, could you speak to it?
Of course. Well, I believe it started when I was very young. I would get roses, and they would symbolize such a potent part of my life. And I would remember everything that happened during this lifetime of roses that would sit with me. And sometimes there are things that I didn't want to remember. And sometimes they included such magical shifts inside of me that I knew that if I was able to extract their essence, being able to come and to sit into meditation and go back into that space. And even for the things that were more traumatic events, and the things that were hard to get through, and the things that felt contracting, it was, I can go back and I can sit with this essence of this time, and to be able to meditate it with it softly.
Wow. So you kept roses from like difficult things too? Could you give me an example of a difficult rose that you saved? Like, are we talking funerals or?
There was one from my grandfather's funeral.
Wow.
And this was, I think, my first time that I had dealt with death. And during this time, I had a lot of death and a lot of grief work come up. And I didn't know how to move through it. And so what I could do at that time is I took these flower petals, I distilled them in alcohol, and I put some honey in there too, just to add that touch of sweetness. And then later, about a year, I found it, and I was like, what would it be like to go back into that grief? And now I can sit in it from more of a healed place. And I was able to have some huge and monumental shifts inside of myself. And being able to tap into that time. And so specifically for the retreat, I mean, what everybody moved through during that container and how powerful it was for every single individual. I have been to so many retreats. I have sat with so many people, but everybody showed up. And to bring it back to the beginning of our conversation, I believe it's because of the container that you hold for people. And especially you and Danny together, oh, you guys are a force field. It was so sacred. And so I saw these roses and I was like, I need to be able to come back here and to come back into this place. And I wanted to gift you this essence because you deserve to know the power that you hold and how many shifts you made for all of us during that time. I think, especially as a healer, it's really easy to think about, oh, the next big thing. And it's really easy to undermine our strength and what, like, the hold that we actually have on people and the change that we do make in the world. And I wanted to remind you of that.
Thank you so much. I'm really soaking that up. Really soaking that up. It was truly a peak moment from the conception of the idea to right through to the end of the retreat. It was so easy. I don't mean that there weren't challenges or like, well, how do we do this part of this process? Because I'd never launched a retreat before. But I had such confidence. There was zero doubt in my mind that I knew I was doing something I was meant to be doing at this moment in this time. I never for a second worried about a lot of the things that people worry about when they're launching a new thing in like the coaching space. It's like, how do I market this to people? Like, I can't explain why, but I'm sure some people listening have had a moment in their lives where they knew they were supposed to do something and it just like, you almost weren't worried if it worked or not because it was so beyond you. You're like, well, this isn't actually about me. Like my ego felt refreshingly detached from the whole thing. It was just like, yeah, we're putting this on for women who want to deepen with each other and work on healing the sister wound and play in healing some shadows in themselves. And it was the field of dreams. Like if you build it, they will come. It was the least effort. Like I feel like I just invited people. There was no like marketing or selling. Like I was just like, hey, we're doing this really cool thing. It's going to be life-changing. And I could say that it was going to be life-changing because I felt it in my body. Yes. So it wasn't like I didn't feel inauthentic. I felt fully in integrity. I was like, well, my life has changed and I know we're going to do more of those things. So it's going to be life-changing. And it was. And I've never simultaneously felt, like I said, more confidence and also more humility at the same time. It was just like stretching me right across the spectrum. And I have these vivid memories of moments throughout the weekend where I would just go to the bathroom or something and I'd be peeing on the toilet, just like looking at the ceiling, thinking existentially as one does. And I would feel the aliveness and joy in my body. Like I couldn't wait to get back out there with every single one of you. Every dripping moment was just so rich and pure and sweet. And I actually had to tell myself to like breathe. And I was feeling like kind of like ripples of ecstasy, like rip through my body. Just, I was like, wow. I looked at my eyes in the mirror, everything, my awareness felt so wide. I felt so grounded in my body. And I truly had the thought, like, this is pushing my edges of the amount of delight and pleasure and goodness I've yet allowed to be experienced through my physical body.
Wow.
It's like almost made me nauseous at one point. I had to sit down. because that's what happens, I guess, when we're growing. The resistance comes up when we're stretching.
I don't think I could have explained it better myself. And I had so many of those moments in the bathroom as well.
Really? At the retreat?
At the retreat.
I told y'all it's a thing.
I would, so much energy. And I feel like in that time, I really learned how to soften into my resistance and to be able to see it and be like, wow, thank you for this container you've held me at for my life thus far. But I feel comfortable enough to go outside of it, to open up that gate and to explore a new level of being. That's why when I went to the bathroom, that's what would always come up. And it was so potent. It's so hard to put into words what happened into that retreat. And I feel like on one layer, talking about it brings so much more richness to it. But at the same time, it also cheapens it because that experience can't be held by words, at least not the language that we have now.
No, like if you know, you know. And if you don't know, you can be at the next one. Yeah. Wow. Well, in rounding out this conversation about the retreat before we move on, was there anything else about your process, your trajectory of the weekend, what the container actually afforded you to be able to go into that you've now integrated a little bit more that you might want to share?
Wow. I feel like a lot of what's been coming up for me in my life was born at this retreat, and its depth. I had always yearned for depth in my female relationships and in my relationships in general. And of course, there are a few lovely humans that I have in my life who are able to provide that. But for most, I felt so suffocated by people in a very energetic level of wanting more and never getting it, and almost just starved. And there, everybody came with their full hearts. And having that memory inside of me and being able to hold all of my standards to that retreat of, this is the only place I am willing to be met. And if you don't meet me here, that's great, but I can hold you in a different container. I, for so long, felt like I think too, I've always done such deep work internally and by myself. And I would go and I would hide when I would need to go through these deep processes. And now I find myself in deep conversation with others, and they are helping me to unfold and to flower into something. And I don't know, it brought this quality of ripeness to my life. And I have found that reflected in so many people afterwards. And it's hard to describe, but thank you.
Are you still in contact with friends you met at the retreat?
I am.
Yeah.
And it's so special.
Did you expect that?
Not at all.
Being someone, because I am so with you on this. Like, I'm different than other people. I'm like, I'm not going to like where I'm going. I should just stay home, right? Like that little gremlin in me who's,
completely.
And so did you kind of arrive with any layer of that? Like, okay, I know everyone here thinks they're different, but I'm really different.
Oh, obviously. I've always been the weirdo. And I'm like, you guys, you think you're weird, but you're not my level of
You
weird.
have no idea. I am making extracts out of roses.
Completely. And so I feel like I've entered into so many of these spaces, and I've been able to have surface level deep conversations, and then it goes and it passes. And, once again, I'm on my own. And now I'm not. And it's beautiful. And there's also so much grief that has come with that, because there is such deep grief in being given what you've always wanted.
Snaps for that. There's such deep grief in being given what you've always wanted. Wow, that statement electrifies me with truth. It really is as glorious being ripped apart, like you're Velcro and you're both sides of it. And it's like, you're just getting exactly what you want. And part of you, part of me, when I'm in that moment, my inner child's like, but why wasn't this here before? And why did I have to wait so long to know love?
That one right there. And I feel like I've been meditating with this concept a lot in these past few days. So it's brilliant that we're talking about it. And I feel like for what I do and who I am and how I live in this world, I needed to be very connected to my body. And there was a level of isolation I needed to be able to become in line with its energies. And I don't know if I would have been able to do that if I had community back then. And I feel like I'm able to have deeper conversations with people who have been isolated, who have gone into the depths of their soul and just sat. And so I don't think I was ready until now.
Yes. So all of the work that you did sourcing from the inner in those moments of pain and suffering and darkness created the map for you to be able to so deeply empathize and relate to other beings, especially other sensitive beings.
Beautifully put. And so true.
Such an important reminder for our fellow weirdos out there who are feeling hella alone right now. It's like, you are carving out the path to your people. And that's a really sticky part of finding out where our boundaries are, what our preferences are, letting go of any guilt around what our preferences are. That was a big one for me, where I was just like almost denying what I really wanted because I really didn't think people could meet me there. Just like small things. Like I want people to show up on the time that we say, or if they're going to cancel, like I notice, like I want to feel thought of. I want to see the humility when life does what life does. I want to see someone be like, hey, sorry, this came up and I know it's probably affected you here and I didn't anticipate it. And let's reschedule. Can you? But in this day and age, I feel like there's so much commodification of one another. I sense that a lot, even in the world and the industry that I'm in. Sort of, it's so strange to be in an industry of spirituality. Like, how did we do that? How did we make an industry out of that? Yuck, that doesn't feel quite right. But, here I am sort of a part of it, or at least on the outskirts in some way. And just watching the way that even in a super awakened community, there's a lot of selling that happens. There's a lot of shaking hands and like quick networking and it's just a really, really interesting space to be in. And it's something that I've been sitting with and navigating a lot of. What are my preferences? How do I adjust to the feeling inside of me where I'm sharing this room with a bunch of leaders and I still want somewhere higher to look? So there's two options, at least that I can see, which is start looking higher or be the leader that I'm waiting to see somebody else in this room being. And either one of those feels like a real scary thing because we get so comfortable in our little spots, and especially when things are, sometimes when things are going well in your life, that can be the scariest time.
I think that's the most triggering time as well.
Why do you think that is?
Because I think we are transient beings and we live in a transient world. And so when something is going beautifully, at least in mine, I feel my soul wanting to cling to it. And that reminder of I have to have non-attachment.
Oh, yeah.
And I have to remember the essence of this feeling and what it's like to feel fulfilled. But I know that I will sink down again. And I think that it's terrifying having peak moments because you know how much further there is to fall. But you know if you don't fall, you can't feel the vastness of the peak.
Yes. Yes. Wow. You have just encapsulated one of, my core paradoxical principles of life. Truly. I do believe we're only allowed to experience the level of joy, ecstasy, pleasure, unity that we're willing to surrender ourselves into the potential for pain. Doesn't mean we actually get the pain, but we have to confront the fear of the pain of losing it.
Completely.
Like if I don't love you that much, then it doesn't hurt that much when you die.
Precisely.
But if I love you hard and I really open myself to you, then it's going to gut me. And some part of me knows that the moment I agree to be in relationship with you, that just around the corner, there's a possibility that either one of us could have their last moment here. And do we agree to share this journey, these precious moments with one another? I mean, that's a big deal.
It's huge.
That's a big deal.
I feel like this has also come up for me a lot lately in working around death. And I feel like I'm always caught up between these two spectrums of being afraid by death and watching it blast me open with people to realize we have this one moment and I want you to have my entire heart and my entire soul, and I want to live fully with you, which is why I call in such a high level of depth from the loved ones around me because I don't want to cheapen the moment.
How did you get so wise about death? Have you been with people as they were nearing the end of their lives?
So in this period when my grandfather died, I had 3 close friends of mine die. My dog died, and then my grandfather died, all within about 2 months.
Wow.
And it completely gutted me. And I didn't know who I was. And I feel like at the same time, there was a lot of energetic deaths and there were relationship deaths as well. And so I felt the element of loss so much. And when my grandfather died, I spent every single moment with him. And I sat with him until the end and I watched his essence fade out of him. And after that, I became my grandmother's primary care provider because she fell and immediately went into a full stage dementia when my grandfather died.
Wow.
Simply because of a broken heart. She couldn't stand it.
How soon after?
Like the day.
The day.
The day.
She fell?
She fell.
And then she went into
She has no memory.
Wow.
And it was so hard to see because up until then, she had taken care of him. She was reading 2 books a day.
Oh my gosh.
She had every single element of her mind. And then it just stopped.
Wow.
Because she couldn't handle losing her husband.
Oh.
And so then I started devouring every single book I could find on death. And I did a death doula course, but it doesn't feel an alignment to me right now. I think that will manifest a little later on in life. But I mean, studying death is life itself. And And it's something that we have had to get comfortable with.
I love this topic. Some people think it's really morbid, but in my writing of the book that I'm working on right now, there's like whole sections on death and impermanence. And I love what you said about facing death, confronting death, because it really is this portal to ultimate freedom in life.
Absolutely.
Can you expand on that and maybe explain? Some people will know exactly what we mean, especially if they've had deep ego-shattering experiences with plant medicines or gone into really deep shadow work with their coaches or therapists. But not everyone really knows what we're talking about when we talk about confronting death, because some people might view death as like an accident or event or something that occurs in old age. But we're talking about it in more of a broader sense too, right? Like at least for me, in the psychological sense, I believe we can experience many deaths throughout the course of one singular physical lifetime.
Completely. I view death as a closing of a circle. I find death in going to sleep and closing the container of a day. I find death in the winter and the seasons, very much where we are right now. I think the transient nature of something, even down to a simple emotion, the 60 seconds of an emotion in your brain, there is a death to that as well. And we have to remain in integrity with it and focused on it. Because for me, it's like what happens in the winter. We have to be willing to die and to forego our leaves for a greater canopy come springtime. And so much of it, especially when you're here in the state of nothingness, to remember your own life and to remember your own light and remember that something always comes, something greater always comes. And I think that's the hope in everything.
I have been so fighting my own season of winter right now. And I know that I've heard that from a couple others. It's hilarious because was talking to Kyle and I was like, I want to be more productive right now. And Kyle and Danny have both been like, remember that it's like actually winter and your body just did all of that last year. Retreat, book, traveling everywhere. Like maybe it's cool if you chill in the winter, and just hibernate. Like Danny was saying, bears go to sleep for months.
It's so true.
You can take a siesta this afternoon.
And this is one of the things that I want to change about humanity. Because, let's think about the winter solstice. It aligns just when everybody is at their absolute capacity for their holidays. And I was, watching it this year, and I was thinking, every single animal out there is sleeping. They're all in hibernation. And us silly humans.
Why am I trying to biohack myself awake right now?
Exactly. And, leading, I guess, into Ayurveda.
Yeah.
This is why I do what I do. When we don't honor these natural seasons and rhythms of life.
Yes.
We get so burnt out.
Yes.
And we have that frustration of what you were just saying, like, why can't I do right now?
Yes, honoring our cycles. And I love this because this is going to segue so nicely into hormones. But hilariously, I really felt like I was late to the game when I discovered this, but this was like 5 or 6 years ago. And I know it's still very much not widespread. But in my deep dive that I did around my curiosity around women's hormones, menstrual health, because at the time I was launching Lunar Wild, which is my product company, which is a first period gift box company. And we send out sacred rite of passage gifts to young women all over North America so far. And I actually started this company during a time where I was not menstruating. I was thinking about that this morning as I knew you were coming on. I thought like, wow, we're probably going to talk about hormonal health. And I was in the shower just thinking about the fact that when I went to the doctor, because I stopped menstruating, they told me, mind you, I was like 25. So you think about what has to happen in a person's nervous system and body for it to go, guess what? This isn't a primary function we need right now. Let's just shut this all down because like we need the resources over here. My physiologically inevitable event for my sex shut off. Like, no, just not coming. And then when I went to the doctor, they were like, well, it's probably, we don't really know why this is happening, but it's probably because you're like a active, highly stressed, thin person. Like me being small had something to do with it. And it's hilarious because I'm probably 30 pounds lighter now than I was at that time. And it didn't feel right when they were saying like, oh, it was about my weight or anything like that. I was like, no, I'm pretty sure there's some deep emotional suppression. And that began me down the path of like some deep shadow work, especially around anger toward the masculine, where I think my body just wanted nothing to do with men. It wanted nothing to do with, attracting men, talking. I think I actually started dating women around this time. I'm now like thinking about it. Like, wow, this is so funny. I was really just done with it. I just suffered so much abuse and projection and distortion that I'd had it. So there were 2 to 3 years wherein I did not have a menstrual cycle at all from like 26 to 27, 28. And my body was then sort of perimenopausal. So I was exhausted all the time. I also got diagnosed with Lyme disease at the same time. So I could barely get out of bed. I was super depressed. My body was always inflamed and reacting to foods just wildly. Like I can't really describe what it felt like to be eating the same as I had eaten my whole life. And suddenly my body was reacting differently to the food. And it felt like there was fluid like under my face and in my neck. And I looked at my body and I was like, I know I'm strong. Like I go to the gym, I have all these things, but it just felt like there was fluid everywhere. And it was just such a highly, deeply depressing time. And it became such the norm that I forgot what it felt like to feel energized, to feel not depressed. My brain chemistry and everything just like really started to create these gnarly pathways that led me into some really deep depressions, which now I know the like extreme link of hormones and mental health and so many other things, but started Lunar Wild in the middle of that. And I remember I felt like such a phony because I wasn't even getting a period and people were asking me to come into yoga studios and do like a new moon circle or a school, like come into a school and talk to the girls about getting their periods. And I felt so devastated. I was like, why is my body not working right? Where's my, like, am I even a woman? Am I like, I actually had to go through this whole shadow process for like 2 months where I just cried about I probably wasn't going to be able to have kids. And like, who would want that? And okay, I could be the auntie. And like, I just like had to actually surrender that too. And worked with a tantric coach in Australia, Martina Hughes. And she did some sessions with me to do some deep emotional work. And I was probably actually really rude to her. I think I've told this story before on the podcast, but she's asking me questions about what's your relationship like with your father? Are you dating anyone right now? What's that like? And I was like, why are you asking me about this? I thought like someone told me you could help me get my period back. And I just totally didn't see the mind, body, spirit connection at that point. I believe it was like after a couple months of working with her, 2 to 3, and also simultaneously opening my heart to dating someone again, and also falling into this like really delightful quad where it was like me dating someone and then my best friend at the time also dating his best friend. So we just like, I suddenly felt like I was on the show Friends, in our New York City apartments that way. It's literally, like we're running across the hall and there's like all this fun, and I wasn't depressed anymore. Like, and it just, something turned on for me where I had hope, I had community, I had safety, I had connection and love. And I was like, okay, I could do this living thing again. And then I think it was after one more month, my period came back.
Wow.
Yeah. So my my nervous system started to regulate. I felt a sense of connection to other in the world. And some of those beautiful emotions started to turn back on that I hadn't felt in like years, like happiness or like basic pleasure or even like admiration of a thing. Because we can get in such dark mental spaces where I even have days still where I have a practice of writing daily gratitudes. I've been doing it almost 600 days consecutively, like just without missing a single day. And I show up for it. And it's the last thing that I do before I go to bed. And some days I get, just real. It's so funny to go back and read my voice on some days. Because some days I'm like, well, it's feeling really hard to feel grateful for anything, but I guess I'm glad I have this bed. Right. And I'm like, you total spoiled brat. Like you have a lot to be grateful for. But some days it's just like that. And that needs to be honored too. Anyway, I digress. It's been such a journey with my hormones. And I know that you have a big interest area in female hormones as well. I'd love if you would share a little bit about how on earth you got interested in going down the rabbit hole about female hormones.
Well, before I dive into my own journey, I just want to acknowledge yours and to see you. You have been through so much, and the way that you approached it, I am bewildered every single time that you are a human. You are beautiful, and what that journey gifted you today. I'm sorry that it happened to you, but I'm grateful that it happened to you because it's unleashed so much power inside of you. And how beautiful that in this time where you were not able to bleed, you were still able to honor a period. I think that's so special. And I think, that was your body's way of saving you and letting you have that energetic period.
Yes, totally. And it did come back. I will say that. Like the longing for it, I started a conversation with it before it came back. I was like, hey, what do you need? How can I help you feel safe to come back? You want more baths? Okay. You want to eat more sweet potatoes? Sure. Like just talk to me. We're on the same team, and I didn't make it about there's something wrong with my body, which is what's so easy to do even when we have a cold or something, it's like, oh, my body has failed me. And I've thought about this even when I have kids in terms of throwing up. A lot of children are like, oh, you have, it's like, they have a fear of throwing up. Like throwing up is this bad or gross thing or scary thing. And the way that I look at it, it's like when I throw up now, I immediately feel like my body is way wiser than me, and it knows that there was something physical or energetic that was not meant to be in my system. And I thank it. I go, oh, thank you. Thank you. Same with like when I sneeze or burp or fart or yawn, I'm like, oh yeah, you know what you're doing. Like, thanks for having me. So anyway, long story short, the period did come back. I fell to my knees that day. It probably looked so melodramatic. I just like rolled off the toilet and started like sobbing into a puddle on the bathroom floor. And I was like, thank you. Because I knew we were in communion with one another again and forever forever, forever, forever. From that day on, my relationship with my menstrual cycle changed. And every time it comes now, I'm like, oh yeah, this is our time. And I love it. And I have all my black clothes that I wear, and I try to let myself free bleed as much as I can. I move around really slowly. I drink lots of tea. I take lots of baths. I write. And it's like a little vacation into myself every single month. And how this all started in the question, to loop it way back, is like seasons, and this idea that like getting rid of this idea that we have to be the same all the time. And even like, I heard one country has like PMS leave for their employees, as in like PMS, we could get into that as a term and how it's talked about as a whole nother thing. But they basically have a week where the woman's in her luteal phase, where she can take time off, because it's like the time that it's actually like a really intense time hormonally, where, shit kind of flies off the handle. But I love that idea of, as an entrepreneur now, I can pay attention to where my cycle is
completely
and plan my life accordingly. Right.
And that's it.
Right.
That's the thing.
Flowing with the seasons. Yeah.
Wow. I love how intentional you are. Yeah, flowing with the seasons. I feel like, I guess I will drop into my own story now. So early on, I think it was my karma in this lifetime to have dysregulated hormones. So something that a lot of women aren't aware of. So if a mother who is pregnant is stressed out during this process and she is making excess cortisol, we only have so much estrogen and progesterone that cortisol will start to take those hormones up. And so we can turn all of our hormones into just cortisol.
Wow.
Which is heartbreaking. What's even more heartbreaking is that when you're with child, you will go into your baby's reserves. And you will slowly start to take them, and your baby can be born with an enlarged thyroid.
Wow.
And
so more prone to going the cortisol production.
Exactly. Route. So your child's going to be more stressed from the day that it's born.
Wow.
And is probably going to have hormone, imbalances. And my mother, she is a beautiful human being, but she definitely had unnecessary stress throughout her pregnancy. And so when I was born, I had an enlarged thyroid.
And you were born?
When I was born. So it started very young for me. I mean, from day one. And the first food I was ever fed was tofu. And I ate tofu for the first year of my life. And that was the only human food that I had. So right away, I was flooded with estrogen.
Wow. Yeah. Well, we'll just talk about that for anyone who doesn't know about lots of amounts of tofu and what it can do to as a endocrine disruptor and xenoestrogen.
Wow. Tofu. And I don't want to completely put it in a negative light. There are some forms of tofu that are really healthy for the human body, but as far as what we have in the United States, it is not something that anyone should really put in. There is a huge amount of estrogen in tofu. And so if we consume a lot of it, it leads to things like breast enlargement, breast cancer, and a various amount of estrogen disruptors. And so
soy is also one of the most genetically modified foods in North America that there is, right? Yeah.
So from early on.
So your mom was just chucking tofu at you. You were just over there with little baby Erin with an enlarged thyroid.
Completely.
Chilling.
So when I was 8 years old, I got my period.
You got your period when you were 8? I was 15.
Really?
Yeah.
I was fully grown at 8. I was this height.
Which is, tell the people.
5'10".
Yeah.
I had triple D's.
No.
And so, very early on, I was always made fun of because
did your milkshakes bring all the boys to the yard?
They did.
Yeah, I bet they did. I'm really sorry about that. At least no one called you mosquito bites, which happened to me when I was young. So thank you to that boy who has still scarred my memory forever. I appreciate
mosquito
you.
Bites. Oh, gosh, younger boys. So, completely dysregulated in that regard. And then I think from imbalance breeds imbalance. And so slowly my emotions started becoming more imbalanced. I feel like I was playing a ping pong match with my hormones. I would have a lot of estrogen and I would balloon up. And then I would try and lose this weight with cardio and with greens and with chicken and really clean sources of eating. And then I'd have too much testosterone because I wasn't honoring the natural fats that my body needed. I wasn't working towards a place of balance. Right. I was just trying to fix the imbalance, which is my favorite thing about hormones, is they are only regulated in a life of balance. And, before I learned this, I was in and out of the hospital every single month. I had PCOS, I had PMDD. My weight fluctuated all the time. I had terrible hormonal acne. Pretty much everything that could come out of dysregulated hormones did. And for so long, there was so much grief because I felt like I could never be normal.
Right.
As I was engaging in this invisible fight to find something that I could not have. And as I have gotten older, there was a lot of traumas that I endured as a younger kid. And so there are a lot of things that I wasn't allowing myself to be safe in my body.
Sexual traumas?
Sexual traumas. And physical traumas as well.
How old were you when that first occurrence?
I was first sexually abused when I was 2. 2. And it lasted from 2 to 16.
Someone close.
Yes. And that was the same person who I had physical violence from. And we were speaking about this earlier. This is a little disjumbled, but this is how it's flowing. When somebody suppresses a cry, you feel it in your throat. You feel it in your thyroid. You have that ache. And that felt like the entirety of my younger life was just holding this thing and knowing that I was not safe. And so even when I did learn about hormones and I learned how to balance them, I learned the role that the liver played into my hormone health. I still couldn't get them balanced. And I was wondering, what's wrong with me?
Right.
I'm eating the right foods. I'm eating for my cycles. I'm even planning for my cycles as well. And still, this thing feels so far away. And that's when I touched the emotional aspect. And that's when I started doing deep work with, my masculine, my feminine, and all of the traumas I'd have in between the two. And that's when I started trying to do work to slowly open up this throat. And since I have engaged with that, I have found health and I have found peace in my body. And it has been such an interesting journey because I remember a few months ago, I went to a new OB. And so I come in with my big fat story and I'm like, well, you know what? You're probably going to be alarmed when you look at my charts, but people have been alarmed since I was about 3.
I want you to be a little alarmed. I want you to be shocked at what I've gone through.
I know. I'm like, this is going to be terrible and you're going to be worried, but it's fine.
God bless all the practitioners that have to deal with us, Erin, who go in and we're fully researched. We're like, here's the thesis I just wrote on your job. So here's all my questions.
Completely.
Yeah.
She was like, okay, well, let's just take your blood work.
Yeah.
And she takes it and she calls me back and she answers the phone giggling. She was like, I hate to break it to you, but these are some of the most balanced hormones I've ever seen.
Wow.
And it was this invitation to finally hang up this story.
Wow.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting giving up this part of yourself.
Right.
That you have clung to for so long. It has been this element of fear and it has shadowed over every aspect of your life.
Right. Right.
And then it's like, well, wait, what can I do now?
Yeah.
Now that I don't have to have all of this mental weight on this one thing.
Yeah, it's a little destabilizing. That's way.
Completely.
Way. Yeah. Wow.
So now with this extra space, I have fallen in love with being able to teach other women because, we look around, this world is not designed to balance hormones, from the foods that we eat to the schedules we keep to everything else, especially women.
Toxins, plastics, EMFs,
everything.
What's in the water.
I mean, to the 9 to 5
pharmaceuticals,
work schedule that's
definitely
designed
birth
for
control,
a man.
hormonal birth control.
There's so much that comes up.
Right.
And being able to teach women, hey, it's in you. And especially, I've been doing a lot of work and I've been reading a lot about menopause. And doctors have used menopause and they've turned it into this uncurable illness, which is so heartbreaking. So we know the time from about 45, 50 to the rest of our lives, we are going to have to succumb to mammograms, to everything else.
Right.
And there is a way outside of that. And there is a way to reclaim who we are as individuals. And that is what my work is. And that is where my passions lie. For women to actually, have integrity in their body. And to be able to make those huge choices. And it's been interesting, especially with this abortion ban that has come up. I feel like there's so much grief in it, of course. But there's also so much freedom because I've watched women start tracking their cycles, caring about what goes into their body, realizing that PMS and other signs of a period are a sign that you are dealing with too much and you're holding too much. Right.
Say that again for emphasis, because I think people, I didn't realize this until I started doing research on it way back when, that all those symptoms we call PMS, it's so normalized, but it's actually not, in the sense that it's, if you wanted to work on it or toward being symptom free, there are things that you can do. Like some people say, well, genetically, like my mom cramps and I cramp, and we have just endometriosis in our family. Like all of that can be true. And it doesn't stop there, because if your mom was eating this way and teaching you to eat this way and you had all of these habits, like it could be something other than just genetic. There can be so many other contributing factors. And I know for myself, in my period journey, from where I was to where I am now, is like, I know when my period is coming. Like, I don't experience cramps, but I know when it's coming. Like I can feel in my body that it's about to come. I don't get headaches. I don't get a lot of acne. It's just like this healthy, full period that comes quick and is gone quick. And it's like, it just feels so right. And I want to say that it definitely wasn't always that way.
Completely.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that you have that within your balance, and I'm grateful to know the same. I mean, my periods, it used to be I'd have this huge PMDD, emotional surge before my period. And then I was bedridden with cramps and nausea and everything else that could come up. And it would differ from being 10 days to 2 days. I feel like my entire life is just trying to catch up to this period.
Right.
And now I bleed every single new moon.
Wow.
And
right on the moon.
Right on the moon.
Look at you.
And it is just the subtle knowing. And for me, it's going, I need to sit with myself today. I need to hide up from the world for a long time. And now every period I have is a really beautiful ceremony to get to know myself again. I feel like some of my deepest truths and realizations have all come from that realm.
Totally. When you were talking about opening your throat earlier, you were like, yeah, and I did all this work opening my throat, and I was juxtaposing my own story about diving into shadow work, being the initiation into getting my cycle back. I was thinking there's so much that we do physically and we can do with food, with supplementation, with all these things that the third dimension offers, that we go out and move our body around physical space to acquire these anecdotes for these things that are occurring inside of us. And there's so much to be said for repairing the energy with ourselves or with a particular organ system within ourselves. I hear women all the time dreading their period. Oh, my period is coming. Oh, hate that. And then got to get more products. Like, I'm going to be grumpy, right? Even just projecting that into the field. And imagine if you had a friend that spoke about you like that every time they were about to see you. Like you were the biggest burden, right? Like, oh, that friend's coming into town.
I love this comparison.
Well, how do you think that friend would feel about you? It's like, hear me, sit with me, hold me. Let's talk together. See what I want to create. What is the menstrual cycle offering? It's offering at the bleed an opportunity to slow down. If you're rejecting that opportunity to slow down, of course you're going to feel at odds with it.
I also think that if you are, this is true for me and it might not be true for everybody, but if you're rejecting your shadow, what do you think it's going to do? It's going to fight so much harder to be seen.
Ooh, like some of the PMS energy is almost resistance to what wants to come up,
completely,
what wants to be felt.
Because if you're just attracted to, your ovulation self, when the darkness comes up, you're not going to handle it right. If you haven't healed, for me, I don't want to project that onto other people. But I think that has a really huge element around it. And as far as my throat, I think there are so many deeper layers in what it means to heal my throat and the throat chakra in general. I think for a long time, much like you, it was allowing myself to feel healthy, allowing myself to feel happiness, because I feel like I called in so much pain, from trauma, physical trauma, to my hormones in general. And there was a time where I was fainting once a day as well. And it wasn't until I just decided I'm going to be happy and I'm going to be healthy and I'm going to live this life to the fullest, that's when everything started to shift for me.
Wow.
And it's been a slow progress out of it. And I think with my throat in general, there was also a lot of, I was not safe growing up. And so finding safety now is what has helped me find balance in myself. And ironically, I did about 1.5 years of EMDR.
Ooh.
And I was doing...
Say what that is for those that don't know.
So it is a very somatic approach to trauma in your body. And so you put on headphones or you're given something in each hand, and it stimulates both parts of your brain. So when you go back and you sit in these traumatic memories, you are able to process them from a healthy and healed place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was doing that 3 times a week, and I was very much in it. And it wasn't until I was done with that circle that my hormones started to clear up.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I just want to say for anyone listening, like there are so many avenues. If you're in a place where you're struggling with your hormones and balancing them, we're going to give some resources here at the end too. But, really trusting your body. I mean, like saunas was a big part of my journey. I looked into Chinese medicine, acupuncture, just different herbs. And it can feel really overwhelming too if you've been trying for a while. And that's where we fall into that trap of like, I'm doing everything. And someone really wise that was working with me at the time just said, that's the energy. That's that like constipated, like, when is it going to be here sort of energy? When is this going to shift? I don't like this part of myself. Until the levee breaks on all that, then the flow can't flow. So I also want to ask you a question about, for some reason this came through about male-bodied individuals in relationship, in partnership, romantic partnership with female-bodied people. What do you want men to know about the women in their lives in regards to their hormones?
I would begin by asking men to remind themselves that women have a different hormone peaking every single week. And that a man in your general body, your hormones peak around 25 and it just slowly declines until you die. And so it's really hard to be able to understand women. But if we are a different person every single week, it's because we are. And it's
kind of scary, yo. It just hijacks your brain a little bit. And you're like, this feels real different than last week.
Real different.
Feeling a little crazy here.
But that's the essence of the feminine,
right?
Is allowing yourself to be in that flow. And I think that's when we see periods and PMS come up, is when we try to, dictate where our flow goes. We can't, we have to surrender. And, is that if a woman is having a full-bodied emotional release before her period, hold her through it.
Yeah.
Because what I find incredibly degrading are men who say that's not the real us, that we're just having symptoms of PMS, we're a bit crazy. Is that emotional release comes from the entire month.
Yes.
And though it may seem a little bit too big for this particular moment, listen to its origins.
Yeah.
Where did it come out? And then also create a container for women to bring these things up to you throughout the month.
Yeah, so they don't get pent up.
So they don't get pent up when the period does come.
Right. It's this idea of like, wow, what got into her? She's just like really lacing into me about things that she never says anything about. Those things have been here all month long. I've just been doing a really great job biting my tongue about it. And right now I can't control it. So yeah, finding the play and the levity in that, and like enjoying the deliciousness of a woman's cycle and the tension and the changing archetypes week to week.
Completely. I also think know your woman's cycle.
Yes.
And this is huge. And also know when to plan things.
Ooh, talk about that.
Well, I know that I don't necessarily want to go out on a date when my period's approaching.
Right.
I think that sounds miserable.
Date with myself in the bathtub.
Completely. But, in those first 2 weeks after, Yes, take me out. I want to experience the passion of life and the flavor of life itself. And that's when I have the energy to do so.
Yes.
And so honor that.
Yes. That's like the spring and summertime
Completely.
of the monthly cycle.
And also, I think something huge for me that sometimes feels like too big of an ask is during that monthly bleed, make us food, care for us, allow us that time to really go into ourselves and to push out energetically and physically everything unnecessary we took on the last month. There's something sacred that happens in that container. And I think it's if men could shift their awareness of it to realize how special it was.
To understand that their woman is also transmuting energy for them, and that women are transmuting and purging energy for the earth. And I don't mean to sound woo here, but truly, this biologically built-in miracle mechanism that is pretty unique to us as mammals. I think there's only, I don't really know how many other mammals menstruate, but I think it's like almost none. It's amazing. And it hasn't, in all of the things that have gone away in all of time for human evolution, like a lot of traits have faded out. Things become no longer relevant. Not all species menstruate. So like it's clearly not pertinent for all species to reproduce. To me, that means there's a lot more going on here that meets the eye. And some of it is working in spiritual dimensions, energetic dimensions, obviously the physical dimension, but to understand that women are these vessels of emotion. They are the muses. They are what art and music is written about. They are the wild and the wonderful. They take off their shoes and they run in the rain and they remind people of what's beautiful in life, what's real, what's alive. And that is fiery. That is a roller coaster. And thank God, because it keeps us alive. So when you see your woman or your daughter or another woman in your life, and she's expressed, she's bleeding for the earth. She's bleeding for you. She's bleeding for humanity and for future generations. This is not an ailment. This is one of the greatest gifts of all creation.
Yes. 1,000 times yes.
Thanks for listening. You know what I love about talking to you? The one singular thing I loved about talking to you is you bring out so much poetry in my soul. And I feel that in just the way that you articulate and verbalize as well. It's so juicy. It's so fun. Yeah. I'm so in awe of you, Erin, and who you are and just what you've done for being as I feel like people always tell me, oh, wow, you're so wise for your age. Well, I won't give it away. You're younger than me, though. And I just look at you. I'm like, wow. Well done. Well done turning into your own shadow. Well done looking at your pain and saying, yeah, but how am I going to use this? And how am I going to love myself deeper?
Thank you. I feel like for me, when I experienced pain when I was young, it was okay. So this is how bad society can get. But how good can it get? And how can I make sure that I can flood those around me with all of that love? It's part of why I think, especially my sexual trauma, it's why I became a massage therapist at a very energetic level, is how can I transform this touch into love?
Right. Giving the world exactly what you wished somebody would have given you through safe, loving touch. Yeah.
Precisely.
Be the medicine. Thank you for being on today, Erin. And I get to have you back because there's so much more I want to talk about in terms of Ayurveda and oil pulling and doshas and all these things. So if you're listening to this and you think Erin was just thebomb.com, please send us a little message requesting that she come back. And we'll have you back by popular demand, I'm sure, just to continue this journey. I'm so grateful to have you in my life as a teacher, as a student, as a therapist, as a friend.
Thank you. I reflect all the same back to you. You're so important to me. And I love what we've been able to connect in our different capacities of holding one another.
Thank you so much. And hey, impressive first podcast. If I do say so myself. Lastly, I want people to be able to find you if they want to call upon you for help in their hormonal health journey, or if they happen to be local to the Austin area and they want to try and access your massage services, which, I guess I'll share you with them. Where can people find you online?
So I have an Instagram, Sattvic Transitions.
Can you spell that?
SATTVIC.transitions.
Okay.
And right now my website is still being formulated. So
that's the best place to connect is on Instagram.
Yes.
And I think you have your Calendly and everything.
I do.
There. Beautiful. Hey, I love you.
I love you too.
Thanks for coming on the Thought Room.
Thank you.